Circumcision. Why would God choose this as a sign of the covenant? Well, let's talk about it. A familiar story in the Bible is that of God calling Abraham and telling him, leave your native country, leave your relatives, leave your family, go to the land that I will show you, and if you do, I will make you into a great nation. When Abraham left his native country, God entered into a covenant with him. God promised Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. Then God says this, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Circumcised. God has made a covenant with Abraham and then tells him that every male is to be circumcised, which would be a sign of the covenant between God, Abraham, and all of his offspring. Every male among you, generation after generation, shall be circumcised. What was God thinking? Circumcision seems like an odd sign, not only because of the physical mark, but also because it appears to be one-sided. What possible relevance would circumcision be to an Israelite woman? It would appear that Yahweh was only concerned with the males. Did females in God's economy have no real role to play? Were they just secondary players when it came to God's covenant with Abraham? What was God thinking when he had the Hebrew males circumcised? Why circumcision? Of all the signs that God could have used to represent the covenant, why would he choose circumcision? Why would the removal of the foreskin of the male sex organ be a sign of the covenant between God and Abraham? Did not this covenant include Hebrew females as well? And if so, how do you explain male circumcision as the sign of the covenant? It would appear that this covenant was just between Yahweh and the Hebrew men. Well, male circumcision as the sign of the covenant can be an odd demand of God, but it ceases to be odd when you have the key to God's understanding. Let me give you that key. The key to understanding circumcision as the sign of the covenant is the miraculous conception and birth of Isaac. Let me say that again. The key to understanding circumcision as the sign of the covenant is the miraculous conception and birth of Isaac. Let me explain. God tells Abraham that he would be a father of a nation. But then God takes it a step further when he tells Abraham this, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham, for I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come forth from you. Wow! Not just the father of one nation, but a father of a multitude of nations. This is the covenant that God has made between himself and Abraham. Abraham would be a father of a multitude of nations, and the sign of that covenant between God and Abraham would be circumcision. This is my covenant, which you shall keep, between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. And then God tells Abraham that it's through the womb of his wife Sarah that God would keep the covenant and fulfill his promise of having innumerable offspring. He says this of Sarah, I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of people shall come from her. God promises that Sarah will have a son. But there is a problem, and it is a big problem. In fact, it is a really big problem. When God told Abraham to be circumcised as a sign of the covenant, he and Sarah were well past the age of bearing children. Here's how Genesis describes their current state. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. There was no physical way that Sarah would ever be pregnant and give birth to a child. She had long passed that moment in her life. But God had promised Abraham that he would have a son through his wife, Sarah. And for that to happen, Sarah's womb would have to become like that of a young woman. And the only way that would happen would be through miraculous intervention. But God made it clear to Abraham that Sarah, his wife, would have a child, and even tells Abraham the name that he is to give that child. Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. And sure enough, Sarah, in her old age, conceived and bore a son who was called Isaac in accordance with the covenant. Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born to him, and Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. The name Isaac means laughter. Abraham and Sarah had conceived a son, and they named him Laughter, because there was no natural way that this son could have been conceived and been brought into this world by the aged Sarah. It was only by the act of God that this miracle could have happened. No one, believe me, no one in their right mind would have ever believed or have ever said to Abraham that his wife Sarah, at her advanced age, would nurse a child, her child, a child that she had conceived and given birth to. All Abraham and Sarah could do was laugh. Isaac was a miracle. But don't miss the big picture. Isaac's miraculous conception and birth is the key to understanding circumcision as the sign of the covenant. Remember, following God's promise to Abraham and his wife Sarah that she would conceive and give birth to a son, every male member of Abraham's household was required to be circumcised. And every male in the generations that would follow, they too were to be circumcised as a sign of the covenant between Yahweh and Abraham. Every male, as well as every female, knew that circumcision was connected to the promise of God that an heir to Abraham would happen. And not just an heir, but that a nation was also part of that promise. So when Isaac was born, he was the start of something very big, something great. He was the fulfillment of that promise that a nation would come forth. The Israelites realized that their entire race began with a miraculous act of God, and circumcision was the visible reminder of where the Israelites came from. They came from God. They came from Yahweh. Every Israelite male would know that his existence was due to the miraculous intervention with Abraham and Sarah. And every Israelite wife would be reminded of this fact, would be reminded of this truth when she had sexual relations with her husband. Her husband's circumcision would be obvious, and it would be a visible and continuous reminder that every Israelite, both male and female, owed their existence to Yahweh. Again, the key to understanding circumcision as the sign of the covenant is the miraculous conception and birth of Isaac. If Isaac had not been conceived and birthed, no nation would exist. But with Isaac's miraculous conception and birth, the nation Israel was brought into existence. And the covenant sign, circumcision, well, it was a major theological truth. It would cause every Israelite, both male and female, to remember their origin, to remember where they had come from. They all descended from the aged Abraham and Sarah, who had a miraculous son, Isaac. Laughter. This miracle son was the start of a nation, and circumcision was the reminder of the one who made it happen, Yahweh. The key to understanding circumcision as the sign of the covenant, it is the miraculous conception and birth of Isaac.